want to talk a little bit more on the musar end of how does a person live ideally in unideal circumstances. So the first thing really is, what are types of unideal circumstances? There are a lot of them. A person can have a circumstance like unideal parnasa, his job isn't exactly what he wants it to be. His wife might not be holding religiously where she is supposed to be holding. Or his children are not doing so well, his health might not be so well. So many problems that a person could have. Even simple things like, his vacation didn't go exactly as planned. That's always a very typical thing that could happen. And what does a person do? How does a person mitmoded? How do you deal with such a reality? And what's the mindset, a mentality that a person's supposed to have when he's under such conditions, and how is he supposed to function? So to sort of give somewhat of an idea, I'll say a story. There was a story with a man in Eretz Yisrael who was running for a very high position. He was running for a sort of some office of governance, and in Yisrael politics could get, especially in the non-religious areas, it could get very vicious, to say the least. And the dirty play is not an uncommon thing in any politics, not just in Israel, obviously all over the world. So one time as he was running, this person that was running against him, he decided that at all costs he has to win. So what does he do? He finds out what the number of the first person is, Guy Reuven. He finds his phone number and he posts it. But he doesn't just post it all over, social media, newspapers. He posts it in a very vicious way. He says, anybody that's looking for mattresses half off, instead of $1,000 mattresses, $500 mattresses, mamash discount, call this number. Advertised it on all the newspapers, and he realized what's going to happen. He's going to get flooded with phone calls. He's not going to be able to live his life normally. He's going to be so taken away from his daily routine. It's going to get into his head. His mentality is going to be off, and I'm going to win. Sure enough, the person gets one phone call. He says, yes, and mattresses. You have mattresses? I'm looking for big mattresses. I'm looking for small mattresses. I'm not selling mattresses. A second phone call. He gets 5 phone calls. He's going crazy. He doesn't know what to do. He says, should I change my number? What should I do in this circumstance? Sure enough, he lost the race because it did affect him. But after 20, 30 phone calls, he said, this is so ridiculous. I'm getting so many calls. He started taking a pen and a paper and he's saying, okay, what kind of mattress do you want? Medium? All right. How many do you need? 3, got you. And he started writing down. He came up with a list at the very end after like a month of 1,000 mattresses. That was 1,000, 2,000, a huge number of mattresses. It was crazy. And he went to one of the main manufacturers of mattresses, called him up. He says, I'm buying a lot. Give me a good deal. Gave him a good deal. He sold it at cost price to all of those people because that's how it was advertised. He didn't make $1, but he built a great name for himself. From there, everybody trusted him as the #1 mattress guy, and he was able to really make an entire business out of it. He did really well for himself. It became the #1 chain for mattresses all over Eretz Yisrael. A lot of people actually tried to do what he did. They said, hey, if it works for him, I'm going to do the same business model. I'm going to advertise. It didn't work the same. It wasn't the same thing. And the lesson to learn from that is a lot of times you have to, what it's called in English, roll with the punches. You get punched, you can, in essence, if it's a person punching, you can fight back. But when it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu sending you something, and you acknowledge it's coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there has to be this moment of, okay, I get it, something's going on over here, and I'm going to see what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants me to do to confront it. And a lot of times, it's because we get phased, we get moved, and it takes us out of our game and out of our element, and that's why we end up reacting in ways that are not necessarily the correct way without judging things properly. So that's part of the work that we have to do, is we have to become what I would call a power plant. We have to harness the energy and convert it into positive energy. To take all of that anxiety, frustration, and build it to be motivation to do good, and to use it as a rocket to propel us much, much higher than otherwise you would have been propelled. In our Kira, I one time said I have great news for everyone. I told everybody, guys, great news. There's a midrash that says that there isn't a person in this world that doesn't have suffering. And everybody looked at me kind of like the blank faces here. What are you talking about? What's great about that? That's terrible news. Everybody suffers? How do you call that great news? It's great news because if you understand the rules of the game, then you approach the whole entire world, Olam Hazeh, completely differently. If you realize that is En Lecha Adam She'eno Yisuin. That's the rules. You go, you play Monopoly, you follow the rules of Monopoly. You play Olam Hazeh, the rules. En Lecha Adam She'eno Yisuin. The question is, what is it going to be? When a man comes into that perspective, it changes the whole dynamic of how he sees the world. The Gemara in Masechet Brachot says this idea. Mizmor David bevocho mipnei Avshalom beno. David HaMelech said a mizmor. He praised HaKadosh Baruch Hu that his son was what? Rebelling against him. I mean, if you think about it, that's not a good thing. Sometimes our children are disciplined at school. Sometimes they're not doing so well. We get upset. It's a little bit worse when Avshalom is taking over the entire kingship, threatening your life, raising an army against you, and taking the entire nation with him. So it's a little bit of a damaging thing. The Gemara even says earlier that it's worse than Milchemet Gog uMagog. To have a son rise up against his father in such a way is worse than Milchemet Gog uMagog in an objective sense. So how is David HaMelech able to muster up the strength to say Mizmor? Very simple, because he knew that there was going to be something. HaKadosh Baruch Hu already told him that there's Mekim Ra'ah. There's going to be an evil. So it could have been a mamzer. It could have been some, no goodnik. It was my own son. Baruch Hashem. At least he'll have mercy on me. At least it won't be something else. And that mentality of, this is what I have to deal with is much better than what I would have had to otherwise deal with. And that puts things in perspective, and it gives us the ability to take the matter and use it as a powerful motivation. We know that in the times of Noach cursed Cham, and he cursed the son of Cham, mainly Kenan, that he would be Eved Le'ehav. He would be a slave to his brothers. And one of the children, the grandchildren of Kenan, was Eliezer Eved Avraham. Eliezer was an Eved Maskil. He's called in the Midrashim. What does an Eved Maskil mean? It means that he was very wise. He said to himself as follows: listen, I'm cursed. That means I'm going to be a slave. So I'm going to confront that reality and accept the reality. Once I accept that reality, I'm going to be a slave. I'm not fighting that. Let me at least choose who I'm going to be a slave to. Do I want to fight the slavery and then it will happen against my will and I will become a slave to barbarians? Or perhaps I should just sell myself today to be a slave of Avraham Avinu. And that's what he did. And he was an Eved Maskir. He took himself from a slavery. He acknowledged it. He confronted it. And he says, how do I turn this into a positive? He said, you know what? I'll be a slave of Avraham Avinu. And then when a person is a slave to Avraham Avinu, Eved Melech, Melech. He himself rose himself out of the concept of slavery. So a lot of times when we accept things, I know as a father, if I have to punish my son or my daughter, so I punish them, and I'm waiting to see at the point where they accept the punishment, where they came to terms, I did something wrong, and I acknowledge that I deserve to be punished, and I'm not fighting it, I'm not crying, I'm not screaming about it, I accept I deserve the punishment, Midat HaRachamim kicks in. Now you're good. You've understood to accept it, now we can move on. Now we can use a different type of approach to confront the issue. So that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu a lot of times waits for us, and we could convert something that's negative into positive. And in the business world, this works as well. There are people that are experts in manipulating debt. They take something that's objectively bad, debt is not a good thing, and they're able to manipulate it in ways that they actually build themselves up, and they bring themselves to a completely different place and make a lot of money out of the concept of debt. I actually have no idea how they do that. I wish I knew, but that's something that's a reality, and that's something that we have to do in the spiritual front. There's a great story. Rav Galinsky says a story. He says that one time a person was visiting the harbors of France, and he was seeing the ships dock and being loaded, and it was amazing things. He saw these designer sofas being loaded onto major ships, and he saw in one place they were shipping produce, another one they were shipping wine, another one cheese. Every single ship had a complete entire containers full of merchandise. And then all of a sudden he looks to the right, and he notices that one of the ships is not loading anything of significance. It's loading boulders, rocks. Can't understand. It's not even diamond rocks or obsidians or something significant. It's big boulders. And he looks and he sees the person that's in charge over there. He says, "Excuse me, can I ask you a question? I see everybody else is loading things of value, and you're not loading anything of value. You're loading rocks. Why would you load rocks? You could get that from anywhere. It could be any place you want. You go take rocks. Why do you have to take it and you're importing it to other countries? Exporting it to other countries?" So he said to him, "Listen, a ship is something that sails in the sea. It needs to be weighted. If a person is not weighing, if the ship isn't weighted, if it doesn't go down in the water, it will sink because it will not be able to stay at the right level where the motor could work and that it can drive itself and function. So if there isn't enough weight, it's going to rise too much out of the water and it won't be able to travel. So if there is merchandise, then you put on merchandise. I happen to have unloaded a lot of merchandise and I don't have any merchandise to take, so I have to load it up with something." And that is actually a powerful lesson of life, because in life it's the same thing. A person is going to be carrying a burden. Choose what kind of a burden. A burden of rocks or a burden of merchandise. And when a person comes with that mentality, it changes the whole dynamic and the whole approach, and he's able to convert tragedy. He's able to convert difficulty. He's able to convert situations of competition and stress and use that as powerful motivation to drive him and to propel him into much, much greater areas. Dafka, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, many times works that the ultimate Yeshua, a person is saved, an individual is saved, a nation is saved when there is a tremendous calamity that befalls. Like in the times of Purim, if you go through the actual story of the Megillah and you see, if it wasn't for Haman, our enemies wouldn't have been destroyed in the same fashion. And it happens time and time again. Haman was the one that brought out the anti-Semitism in full view. Haman was the one that was able to convince Achashverosh that he should have the sole power. Haman did all of the necessary steps in order to make it that the ultimate Yeshua would be in the highest and most complete fashion. If he wasn't there, the anti-Semites wouldn't have ended up dead. Amalek wouldn't have ended up being wiped out. So sometimes it's actually the difficulty, the ra'ah, the thing that appears to be evil, that from there is the propulsion of the Yeshua, of the good and of the Tov. On one time in Rosh Hashanah is a time where everybody wants things to be very good, and you want to come in with a very spiritual attitude. You want to come in with this sort of mentality of, I'm ready for this holy day. And sometimes things don't go exactly as planned. There's a great story Rabbi Mutzafi says about Rabbi Yudaptaya. He says this story in the name of his father, Rav Salman Mutzafi. That Rabbi Yudaptaya, he was a big mikubal, Rabbi Yudaptaya. And one time it was Rosh Hashanah, and Rosh Hashanah, especially in the time of the mikubalim, is even more, carries even more weight. And what happened was that Rabbi Yudaptaya came home from Bet HaKnesset, and he came with, as he would always dress on Yom Tov and on Shabbat, with white, beautiful white robes that he would be wearing with a white turban, everything white. And he comes to, in Iraq, what they would do is they would, especially during that time of the year, it's very, very hot. Well, most of the year it's hot. And they wouldn't eat in the homes because there was no air conditioning, of course. You would eat on the rooftops. So Rabbi Yudaptaya went up to the rooftop where everything was set up. The table was set up very nicely. The candles were lit. And he sits down to read Ptichat Eliyahu. So Mekubalim say this before the Kiddush. As he's sitting down, he's going to fix his hat, and he straightens out his hat, and he accidentally hits into the bowl where all of the nerot, they used to put the candles into a bowl with oil. And he hit the entire bowl. The whole oil with all the candles spill all over the place, all over his clothing. And his wife looks at him with eyes like, oh my gosh. This is like the worst thing that could happen, not because just, okay, you got your clothes dirty, but on Rosh Hashanah, everything on Rosh Hashanah is about the siman. It's like, what kind of a siman, what kind of a year are we going to have? And he looked at his clothing, they were all dirty. He had to go back downstairs, change all of his clothing into a new pair of clothing. He comes back upstairs, about to do the kiddush. He's holding the cup. Somehow it slips out of his hand, spills all over the table. Wine spilling everywhere. Now you can imagine the day that you've planned perfectly and waited for already 30 days preparation, slichot, and everything else that he went and did, and now everything is like basically unwinding before his eyes. The cup fell. His wife wanted to go bring the food. It says that she came with a tray of the chicken. As she was walking up the stairs to the attic, she tripped on something. The whole platter fell on the floor. The main dish just fell all over the floor. And if that wasn't enough, and what's Rabbi Yehuda doing? He's calming his wife down. Don't worry about it. It's not a problem. It's okay. It's okay. He didn't get upset. He didn't get angry. This big cat comes along and starts pouncing on the chicken. Now he's wrestling the chicken from the cat and fighting and shooing it away. Gives it a ge'ara. It runs out. And he's picking up the food from the floor and fixing to see what's edible, what's not edible, what you can have, what's dirty. Put it all on the plate. He said, don't worry. Calms his wife down. She's already at this point, she's bawling, she's crying already. And he says to her, it's not a problem. He looks up and he says, Satan, I know you're trying to get me to be angry. It's not going to work. I'm sorry. I'm not going to be angry, and as a matter of fact, I'm going to be even more happy. And he started singing songs of Rosh Hashanah. And because he was on the rooftop and everybody around him was also on the rooftops, they heard the songs coming from his home, and everybody in that whole vicinity started singing along with him. Rav Salman Mutzafi says, my Rav told me, my Rabbi, Rabbi Yehuda Ptaya said, I never had a more successful year, spiritually and physically, like that year. Why? He was able to convert difficulty into something that was motivational, into something powerful, into something inspirational, in a way that even good times is not able to do. I'll finish with one final point. On Shabbat, we spoke about Rabbi Pereda. I think this is a great story. The Gemara tells us a famous story of Rabbi Pereda that has a powerful lesson of how a person can convert small things into massive things. What happens with Rabbi Pereda? He has a student, and famously he teaches a student Torah. Every Mishnah, it would take him 400 times until he learned. Forget Daf Yomi. He's not able to do Daf Yomi. He was Shura Yomit, right? He would learn one line a day, and he would repeat it 400 times. And there was one day where the student got distracted. Someone walked in, the student lost his concentration. The Rav taught him the 400. He knew the 400 was up. He said, okay, you got it? He says, no, I don't remember anything. He started again, another 400 times. This time pay attention. Okay, good. He learned it 800 times that day. Bat Kol comes down from Shamayim, says, Rabbi Pereda, you did something so incredible, we're going to give you a choice. 400 years, or you and your entire generation will be zochet to be Bnei Olam Haba. Which one are you going to choose? He says, I don't care for myself, I care for the entire generation. I want them to all have Olam Haba. The Gemara says, give him this and this. He ends up both with 400 years and with Olam Haba. So I want to focus for 1 minute on the student. I mean, Rabbi Pereda, we all know the story of Rabbi Pereda and that angle of it, but look at it from the perspective of a student. Here's the student that every single day is mamash the lo yutzrach. He's the one that the Rebbeim have to call in the parents every single day and say, listen, your kid, he needs therapy. Your kid, he needs this. Your kid, he needs that. Like giving him a whole laundry list of things that are wrong with him. And this kid knows, like, I'm not doing good. So, in essence, what would you have done? What would anybody else have done in such a situation? You're not getting anything. It takes them 400 times to learn. You give up. You say, oh, it's not for me. I'm not cut out for this. I'm going to go work. But no, he stuck to it. He said, no, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to learn. Oh, it's only one line. Okay, it's one line. But I'll do my one line, and that's my job. And sure enough, what ends up happening? Because of his one line, because of this student who wasn't willing to give up, he became a partner that when every single person, if that generation goes up to Shamayim and they say, you have a free ticket to Olam Haba, and he says, why? What did I deserve? Well, there was Rabbi Pereda and his student. The one line that he went and didn't give up on made him shutaf, made him a partner in the fact that the rest of the generation was Zochet to Olam Haba. It's not insignificant. The ability to deal with struggle and to cope with it and to take it in stride and to grow from it, explodes essentially into spirituality when it's converted into that currency. And that's what our job is in our lives. If it's our wives that didn't exactly respect us, if it's the boss that didn't give us the raise, if it's the children who are not exactly 100% healthy, in all of those circumstances, what we have to remember, what we have to do is convert it. Take it, channel it, make it spiritual. Don't be surprised. There's going to be issues. There's going to be ra'ah. But take the ra'ah and invest it and convert it and manipulate it to be a spiritual force for good and be able to be zocheh to Chayei Olam Haba. Chazaq u'baruch to everyone.
Chazaq u'baruch. Okay, Chazaq u'baruch. Just to piggyback off of Rabbi Dahan, first of all, thank you very much to Rabbi of Meirov for getting us together again, another legal holiday. Birshut Amitai, Rabbi Dahan and Rabbi Meirov. Rabbi Dahan, in classic fashion, just chooses abstract topics, and we have to kind of run with it.
I didn't want to choose a topic, so I chose.
So that's usually the modus operandi, which is okay. So there's a few things we can talk about in terms of living ideally in an unideal world. If you look, even from so Rav Dahan actually took it from a more of a hashkafic perspective. I want to just look at the halachics of it. Just cut and dry halacha. If you open up a Shulchan Aruch, do you know what percentage? These terms are thrown around a lot. Lechatechila b'di'avad. Lechatechila just literally means preferably, the way a person should act. Then there's something that's called b'di'avad. Most people misuse the term b'di'avad as not the best. That's incorrect. B'di'avad doesn't mean not the best. In Aramaic, b'di'avad means after the fact. Post facto, after it was done. Which means, if something happened and you can no longer do the preferable, now this is the halacha. Do you know, proportionally, what percentage of the Shulchan Aruch deals with halachot of b'di'avad?
60%?
More. Almost 80% of the Shulchan Aruch speaks about b'di'avad situations. Can you imagine that? Which means the way halacha is set up, lechatchila is great. It's wonderful to act in the most preferable manner. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and by extension the Chachamim and the Poskim, they understood that the world is a very imperfect place. And because of that, b'di'avads happen. Now again, it's true that in the realm of the halacha, sometimes even before the situation happens, there are circumstances that warrant acting in a b'di'avad manner. But b'di'avad means after the fact. So now it's not perfect anymore. I can't act in the most preferable manner. So what do I do next? And Maran says, look, open up Shulchan Aruch. You have tons of laws that apply just to those situations. It's a very, very interesting, and that all comes from Shas and the Poskim, which means that even Chachamim Zechron Bracha, they understood that the world is a b'di'avad place. It's not utopic. If we lived in a utopia, everything would shrink. Shas would shrink, the Rambam would shrink, the Shulchan Aruch would shrink, everything would be, okay, you live in a utopia, in a perfect world, A, B, C, this is what you do, and over. But it's not. Look at all of the volumes, look at the endlessness of the Torah Kedusha. That's because we live in an imperfect world. Now, what sometimes happens is, like I said, there are situations where a person, for whatever reason, cannot act in line with the lechatchila. There are many, many different circumstances. It could be health, it could be parnasah, there's many different things, and it depends on the halacha. There's 4 different sections of Shulchan Aruch. There's Orach Chaim, Unideal, Chush Mishpat, Even Ezer. There's all sorts of different laws. And not always can a person do the best. We try very much. We, Baruch Hashem, Am Yisrael, it's a tremendous shevach for Am Yisrael, and we try to be mehadir b'mitzvot as much as we can. We try to invest as much time and effort and money and enthusiasm into beautifying and doing the mitzvot the best way possible. And we send our children, Baruch Hashem, to the best schools possible, to the best yeshivot possible, in order for them to get the best chinuch possible, so that even when we're not here anymore, they'll be able to navigate this crazy world without us. That's that's what a person's whole thing is. That's what we live for. We live in order to bestow, to bequeath that legacy unto our children and unto our talmidim. However, there are situations where a person can't. That's why either the person is intelligent enough to be able to look into poskim and paskin for himself. Sometimes, many times not. You call it Rav and you say, Vodo, this is my situation, X, Y, and Z. What does halakha dictate for me in this given situation? And sometimes, obviously with shikul da'at, with, a person has to use judgment and discretion. But a Rav will sometimes give a heter based on your circumstances. This is mutar, and sometimes not. Depends on the situation. Now, that's okay. But what sometimes ends up happening is, and this is a syndrome that's not only in our community, but it happens in many different communities, is that people, let's put it this way, heterim are contagious. They love osmosis, which means if there's a heter given, then there's a hotline set up, 1-800, dial a heter. What happens is, now that's the way it works. And you have certain rabbanim that are on that hotline, and then, the way it works is networking, just like networking works in business. It works like that in halakha too. You got a heter for this. Oh, who gave me a heter for that? This one. Now again, I'm not talking about for people that are looking for kulot in all sorts of areas. The Gemara has very harsh words about that. The Gemara Masechet Eruvin, the Vav Amud Bet, the Gemara says, prior to the Bat Kol, the heavenly voice coming out from heaven and saying that halakha is always like Bet Hillel, halakha wasn't always like Bet Hillel. Before halakha was nikba, was established like Bet Hillel in the Shamayim, who halakha followed? The Gemara says, anyone, really. The Gemara says you could follow Bet Shammai or Bet Hillel, but the Gemara says there's one catch. What? Ike Bet Shammai kekulehon kechumrehon. Ike Bet Hillel kekulehon kechumrehon. You got to pick and stick. You can't just cherry pick. And the Gemara says if you look for the kulot of each one, you go kula shopping. The Gemara says rasha. It's called a rasha. If you look for the chumrot of each one, the Gemara says Elo Rasha, a tipesh. The Gemara says Hamor. Why? The Gemara brings a pasuk in Mishle, Ve'akesil b'choshech olech. What are you looking for chumrot? Vayitzberu otam chomarim v'tiv'ash haaretz. Too many chumrot bogs you down. You got to know. Rather, the Gemara says prior to the bat kol, pick one. You stick with Bet Shammai, that's fine, but go all the way. You stick with Bet Hillel, you got to go all the way. The Gemara says that was later nullified. You can't pick Bet Shammai anymore. Bet Shammai, like the Gemara says, Bet Shammai, bimkom Bet Hillel, ena Mishnah. You can't follow Bet Shammai. The Ari Kadosh writes in a few places, Shara Kavanot, Shara Gilgulim, he writes in a few places that in Olam Haba, halakha is going to follow Bet Shammai. Why? Because technically the Gemara says, Bet Shammai was machadedet fe. Bet Shammai were sharper, were more erudite than Bet Hillel. However, the Gemara says two reasons why Bet Hillel were zoche likbo halakha kamotam. Why in Shamayim did they decide halakha should follow Bet Hillel? First of all, because they were more numerous. They were the rov. And number two, mipnei shenochin va'aluvin hayu. They were they were humble. And not only that, what was the symbol of their humility? Anytime there was machloket, anytime they needed to say the differences of opinion between them and Bet Hillel, they would always discuss the opinion of Bet Shammai first, and then they would come to their own opinion. But anyway, you see people in general, even for a society that prides itself on looking to serve a Kadosh Baruch Hu in the best way possible, sometimes, and it's really something that Rabbanim have to contend with. You have to be very, very careful. I'm speaking from personal experience, and I'm sure my colleagues would agree with me. We see this on not even daily, on multiple times a day basis, that people hear about kulot. Oh wow, and this one, and it's like everybody comes and tries to take advantage of that. That's not in Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want a Jew to live that way. Even if kulot exists, we're not supposed to be looking for those. Kulot are a last resort. Looking for ways around, looking to live in the avad zone, that's a last resort. We have to be we have to strive for perfection. Not always is perfection achievable, attainable. We have to at least strive for that. To strive, just like anything else that we do. What's the difference? Tefillin, person looks to buy the best. Arba'at Aminim, all of the mitzvot, we try to buy the best we can. And then when it comes to keeping simple halachot, sometimes things go by the wayside. It's unfortunate that people look. For instance, Maran Zichrono Livracha, I'll give you an example. Maran Rabbeinu Ovadia Yosef Zecher Tzadik Kadosh Livracha. He was known to, when he was asked, "Are you a mekel or a machmir?" He says, "I don't understand the question. Do you rule leniently or do you rule stringently?" He says, "None of the above." He says, "I rule lefi halacha, whatever halacha dictates in that given situation. That's how I rule." In general, by the way, he says, most of his rulings were on the more lenient side because he happened to have been Sfaradi. Maran Achida writes that Sfaradim were imbued. We have a nitzot shel betilin. If you look, there's only 6 cases in the entire Shas. You can look in Tosfot, Sukkah Gimel Amud Aleph. Only 6 cases in the entire Shas that Bet Shammai is more mekel than betilin. They're all brought down in a Mishnah and Masechet Eduyot. And anyway, Mikol Makom, Bet Hillel in general is more mekel. Bet Shammai, always mahmirim. Yeah, that's usually in Shas. Sfaradim, says the Chida, Sfaradim in general, they got a nitzotz from Bet Hillel. That's why if you look, in general, by the Poskim Sfaradim, first and foremost, Maran HaShulchan Aruch, in general, mekilim. In general, more mekil. Ashkenazim, on the other hand, says Maran HaChida, in general, chumrot. Why? They're nitzotzot shel Bet Shammai. Tamid machmirim. That's what now, the Chida said about himself, the Chida's father, Rabbeinu Rafael Yitzchak Zerachia Azulai, he was Sfaradi. So he says, but his mother, the Chida's mother, was Ashkenaziyah. So he says, he had the oh, you serious? Anyway, the kids are he had a fusion. He had a fusion of both Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel inside. The fire of Bet Shammai and the likbo halacha, the ability to be mekel like Bet Hillel. Anyway, but that's the way we go. It's interesting. Watch this. The Talmid Muvhak, there's a Sheilot Utshuvot Tshuva Me'ahava, which was written by a Gaon Rabbi Elazar Fleckless. He was the chief disciple of the Nodab Yehuda, Rabbi Yecheskel Halevi Landau of Prague. He was a tremendous Gaon. He took over the rabbinate of Prague after his Rebbe, the Nodab Yehuda, passed away. This is quoted. Maran Zichron V'cha brings it in Yabi'al Min Chelekei Yored De'al Siman Gimel. He brings down over there. That's the tshuva about Basar Chalak. There's been, Baruch Hashem, a lot of good noise in the past, I would say, decade or two, about Bet Yosef making a comeback in the market. Baruch Hashem, so much noise that Bet Yosef today is cliche. When you say Bet Yosef, it's like Shabbat Shalom. Everything's Bet Yosef, right? You can't find any non-Bet Yosef. The cheese is Bet Yosef. Akol Bet Yosef. Everything's Bet Yosef. Yeah, you walk in. Yeah. So I'm saying that you see a yogurt on the thing. Chalak Bet Yosef. Lidat Maran. Okay, I'm saying that. Anyway, Mikol Makom. They pick up. They know what sells. Anyway, that's a different shir. But Mikol Makom, famously, the Rama, without getting too much into these halachot, sometimes people write Shchitat Bet Yosef. And that's a joke, because in terms of Shchita, in terms of the actual slaughtering, there's no machloket between Maran and Rama in the method of slaughter. It has nothing to do with it. There's a disagreement between them about the permissibility of a certain adhesion on the lung as it's being checked. So I guess the way it came out is because nobody wanted to say Trefat Bet Yosef. That doesn't have as much of a ring to it. So they called it Shchitat Bet Yosef and Yodama. But anyway, it's a big machloket. And famously, Maran is Mahmir about this specific adhesion, and the Rama is Mekel under certain circumstances. The Tshuva Me'ava writes, says in general, if you look at the Shulchan Aruch, about 90% of the time, Maran Shulchan Aruch is Mekel and the Rama is Mahmir. Anytime, not always, but in general, V'yesh Omrim, if you see the Rama disagreeing, he'll usually be Mahmir over Maran. He says, Halevai the Ashkenazim, the Chacham Tzvi was purported to have said the same thing. Halevai Ashkenazim would have been Mekel, would have accepted all the leniencies of the Shulchan Aruch in the rest of the Shulchan Aruch, and accepted his not one, but this one specific stringency of basar halak, as opposed to being mahmir everywhere else and being mekel on basar halak. These were words uttered by the Tshuva Me'ava and the Chacham Tzvi, Geonei Ashkenaz. That's what they said about this. Anyway, the same thing applies to Maran Zichron Bracha. In general, he's mekel, and then there are certain situations where he's mahmir about certain things, and not only that. When Maran Zichron Bracha was mahmir, he was very vocal about it. In his sfarim, in his shiurim, he made sure, whether it's pe'ah nochrit, or, he had his top 5, top 10 halachot that he always kept pounding about. And, Rabbeinu Tam, and then people say, no, but we can't handle that. Everything else is fine. Platot on Shabbat, and, timers, and everything else is great. When it comes to the few things that he really lays down the law on, he said, no, he can't handle that. That's not a show of Yirat Shamayim. A Yirat Shamayim doesn't cherry pick kulot. Yirat Shamayim is a person who looks to do what's correct. Not saying you have to be mahmir all the time, but look, pick and stick. Look to do what's correct. Don't, dial a heter. We're trying to abolish that hotline because it's not fun, and people really they don't understand that you can really mess yourself and your family up big time spiritually by living in such. What is that? What kind of message does that send to a person's children? Yeah, we're going to look for the easiest way out. That's not Yirat Shamayim. That's not fear of heaven. Fear of heaven is looking to do what's right. If it's kula at the time, okay. If it's chumrat, not everything is always optimal. This world is not a utopia. That's true. But we have to strive to make it as utopic as possible, to live to the highest standards as possible, whenever possible. If it's not, okay, we can visit that. But at least to have those musagim, to have an idea, to shoot, to strive high, so that even if you miss, shoot for the moon, even if you miss, you'll fall to the stars, the wise man once said. And that's what I have to say for today. Thank you for listening.
Okay, Chazaq Baruch, Rabbi Dahan, Rabbi Elbaz, באמת דברים that are very, very inspiring, very mechazek. Of course, thank you to my brother Rabbi Yaniv. Thank you Eliyahu, Rabbi, for organizing. Rabbi Kleinman, always behind the camera over here. Chazaq Baruch to you as well. Thank you very much. But I'll share with you just mamash a couple of minutes about this topic. A little bit, I'm going to veer off from what the other Rabbanim said, but hopefully something could be mechazek the olam b'ezrat Hashem. Anyone here has ever been to a circus before? Not your house, like a real circus. You've been there? What?
We live in Queens.
We live in Queens. Okay. I think it's fascinating. It's a pele how they take different animals. You could take dogs, and they have sea lions and dolphins and whatnot, and they're doing all these tricks, all these different performances. I want to focus for a minute about the bears. The bears usually come in with a nice vest, very shiny, very sparkling, with a bow tie for the boys, a mini skirt for the girls, right, for the female bears, and they come in on all fours. Suddenly you pay attention, when the music goes on, the bear starts jumping up, and it's standing only on the hind legs, and it starts dancing. Pele playing, and when the music stops, they go back on all fours. And the question is, how do they train them? How do they do this? Well, they understand music. If I go to the zoo right now, and I play some music, some Yaakov Shrekki music, will the bears start dancing for me? So what's the trick behind getting the bears to do this at these carnivals? So believe it or not, Rabotai, for all my animal rights individuals here, a lot of cruelty goes behind training animals. When you read it, it's actually very shocking. With the bears, what do? They take them to a metal platform. That's where they train them. Under the metal platform is what? They have a heating element. Now, every time they raise the heat, the fire, they put on the music. And if the bears, it starts to get hot, they want to protect themselves, so they start jumping up, and they're only standing on 2 of their legs. And they're hopping from right to left and right to left. And when they lower the flames, they turn down the music. And they do this over and over again, where they're conditioned to believe that when they hear music, it means they're in danger. They're about to burn. And when the music is off, they're back to normal. So lo and behold, comes along the circus, we're all sitting in their front row seats, right? And you see the bears coming in dressed so nicely, and you think they're dancing with simcha. And we interpret a smile in their face somehow. But in reality, it's pure torture and manipulation of their minds. But for us observers, everyone looks happy. Look at these animals. All of them seem to be besimcha over here. Rabbi, we're living in a generation in a very unideal reality, yeah? Kacha? Unideal reality.
It's there, you can read it.
Where the social media is really controlling our lives. Instagram, Facebook, amongst the frum community, the religious community, definitely the secular community. And you see so many people look so happy. Look how they're dressed. They're smiling to the camera. And they're there every day by this party and this event and this place and that place. And we're thinking, wow, halavai could have the simcha that they have. And we don't realize many of these people are just like those bears. They have such emptiness, such fear, such something is missing in their life. But when they're in the public eye, it looks like they're dancing and having a good time. And Rabotai, the saddest part is that we see it. We see how it's destroying the chinuch of our kids. We see how it's destroying relationships. We see how it's destroying our spirituality. And for some reason, we're all falling for this. And it's part of our lives. And we allow it to take place. And very, very few people do something about it. Until they really hit rock bottom. So I want to discuss with Rabotai for a few minutes. Just the dangers of this matter. And what we could do to B'ezrat Hashem live ideally in a world that's maybe not so ideal. First of all, I want to give you an example that Rabbi Miller hints to in his Torah Avigdor that was handed out here in Shuls, which is beautiful. I encourage everyone to read it every week. If you come over to me and say, Rabbi, I need you to help out my wife. We're having a struggle at home. Our kids are giving us a hard time in the morning, in the afternoon. I can't. I got to go to shul. I got to go to shiur. Could you get me some help in the house in the morning when I'm in shul? And then when I'm at work, my wife complains the kids come home from school. They're driving her nuts. Give me some help. Don't worry. I'll take care of you. And I send you for your girls a woman that has no yirat shamayim, purutza, very immodest, lives very, very promiscuous. I said, she'll be taking care of your girls, and I give you a drug addict to take care of your boys. I said, they're going to be there every morning from 7 to 8 to take care of your kids, and afternoon from 4 to 6. How many of you guys would sign on to this? No one, right? But Rabotai, we don't realize that many of us do this every single day. You may not bring in these physical beings into your house, but unfortunately, what do? The kids are driving you crazy. Here, take the phone and watch this. Sheba Sheket. What are they watching? Who's the presenters of these shows? Who's the one performing over there? Do people have yirat shamayim? Are they teaching them good qualities? Are they teaching them things that you want your kids to become? So we're bringing in babysitters that are literally destroying our children, but at least we're getting 1 or 2 or 3 hours of peace of mind. Rabotai, it's no different. Maybe that's even worse than me bringing in someone from the street to take care of your kids. One of the common claims that you hear from parents today is, Rabbi, you don't understand, today the kids are very spoiled. Our kids are very spoiled in our generation. This will never happen. You agree to this or not? Are the kids really spoiled? Ali, what do you say? Yeah, right? What do you say? Tzaddik, they're spoiled? Rabbi, what do you say?
Kids and the parents.
Kids and the parents. I'll take it a little different. Rabotai, the kids are not spoiled. The parents are spoiled. Your child is born knowing nothing. Okay? He comes in with zero knowledge. Already from the age of 1 year old, the kids already know how to scroll on the phone. They go when the messages come through, they know how to flip it up. They know how to go to the next video. By the age of 2, 3, they already know how to use their passwords. Right? They put the phone by the mother's face. What happens is, Rabotai, we're coming along and saying that our kids are spoiled. We are spoiling them. We're spoiled. We don't want to have to deal with them. We don't want to sit and read a book with them. We don't want to play basketball with them. We don't want to do homework with them. So we send them straight to the phone, to the iPad. So today that our kids are spoiled is just not accurate. But Rabbi, all of the kids in the community have it. Yeah, but if you send your kid to a better yeshiva that have rules and guidelines, you know what? You're putting them in the right environment. So Rabotai, it's not easy, I agree. Today with men and women working and everyone's overwhelmed and the stress of paying off a mortgage and tuition, everything else, I know it's not easy. But Rabotai, like the Rabbanim said, this is our tafkid. Don't look for easy ways out. This is the chinuch of your children, the most important commodity you have in this world that's worth trillions of dollars. And for us just to give it away like that is very, very detrimental. Like Victor Miller says, the brain weighs, depending on your age, we want to become an adult about 3 pounds. Kids, about 2 pounds, whatever it may be. Some people, I wonder if they even have 1 pound in there. But would you allow your child to walk with 3 pounds of diamonds in the street? It's a see-through bag. You're telling him, deliver it from location A to location C. Would you let him walk in the street like this? He could be robbed in a minute. A bag of diamonds, are you serious? Says Rabbi Miller, how could you let your bag of brains that your children have, you have 4, 5, 6 children, let them just walk around in the streets? Or let them have access to things? Back then they had no internet. Today, you have it in your pocket, in your bedrooms. How could you let your kids just wander around like that? They're going to be stolen, they're going to be kidnapped, spiritually speaking. So Rabotai, these are very serious things that are taking place yom yom in every single house, in every single community. And we have to take full control of the situation. Now with that being said, I'm not telling you to be extremists and just suddenly go from katzeh to katzeh. I'll share with you one quick point from Meirov Salomon, and then one little idea from the Ben Ish Chai. Actually, I'll start with the Ben Ish Chai first. We know there's a famous Gemara. There was a machloket between the Chachamim, Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim, about how to accept students in the yeshiva. Rabbi Gamliel's shita, what was his opinion that what should be? Tochoke baro. Inside, outside, you have to be perfect. Yirat Shamayim, knowledge of Torah, everything has to be perfect. Otherwise, sorry, not this yeshiva. And others felt what? No, listen, mitoch shelo lishma, ba'al lishma, let him come in, and eventually he'll get the hang of it, he'll become part of the chabura, become Bezrat Hashem married Yirat Shamayim. So no, what's the right approach? It says in Ben Ish Chai, if you look at Pirkei Avot, it says in Pirkei Avot, Ve'ha'amidu Talmidim Arbeh, which means you should have many students, implying that who's right? The approach of making a barrier to students or just letting everyone come in? Let everyone come in, the Chorah, no? So it says in Ben Ish Chai that it's true, Pirkei Avot is advocating to have many students, but what's the next statement in Pirkei Avot? It says, Ve'amidu Talmidim Arbeh, and then wasn't it Ve'asu? Siag l'Torah. You got to make a fence around the Torah. If you're going to have an institution that's going to have rules, okay, you want to be accepted, boys and girls, here's the rules, A, B, C, D. If you guys follow the rules, then you know what, B'chava, come on in. If you don't want to follow the rules, I'm sorry, you cannot join. So it says Meirov Salomon as follows. He says, when it comes to technology, he believes that had this existed in the times of David HaMelech, in the times of Chazaq, he says, I have no doubt there will be Isur Yichud. Isur Yichud to be with a computer, with a phone, with the internet, whatever it may be. But today, the Chachamim have no power to make a new gzerah. We can't make new gzerot. He said, I give a very, very strong suggestion. Everyone that has computers, today the yeshivas make the kids use computers, they have to research. Beseder. Make sure that every single computer screen is facing an opening of the house. So if this is a living room, the computer should not be facing here, where people walk by, no one can see what's going on. The computer should always be facing by the opening. Kacha, you're creating an extra protection that no one should do something wrong. Shouldn't be a situation where your children have access to computers in their bedrooms. Then you're wondering, why is he sitting on the roof for 4 hours? Halavai was a Torah any time. But I don't think that's what he's doing as a 15-year-old boy. Right? Rabotai, you want to make sure that you create the right environment. But how do you create this environment? You can't just impose this on your children. You, as parents, have to do the same thing as well. If you have an environment where this is the way our house runs, we're going to give you guys access, everything limited, b'chokhmah, b'seyagim. Then Rabotai, next thing you know, you're going to take the shmutz of the world, you're going to be misanen and filter it properly, and B'ezras Hashem, you're going to protect your family from all the junk. That's why we have a mezuzah in front of our house, in all our rooms. Why? Atkan, we're not letting the street come into our house. Right? It's enough we have so many challenges in the street. But once you enter through these doors, there's a different rules. It's a different playing field. And this, Rabbi, I think, is something we all have to work on. To realize that it's a very, very difficult generation. Very difficult challenges that we have. In order for you to beat these challenges, you must work as a team, as a family. Husband, wife, with the Rabbanim, with the rabbis, and get consultation with them, how to do this, how to deal with this situation. And Bezrat Hashem, hopefully, will raise children and raise families that are tiferet and being Mikadeh Hashem Shamayim.